I kind of had my mind blown when I saw that you make $750,000 part-time in retirement last year. How are you doing now?
I'm happy to say that I just finished my taxes for this year, and that number's risen again to about 950, and still very part-time. I traveled about 5 months last year, and I'm gonna travel about 5 months this year. He went and got me a senior vice president, a technical senior vice president as a mentor. So he made a call and said, hey, I've got a tech leader who's getting ready for VP. Will you spend some time with him to get to know him? And that was a critical step because I probably couldn't have gotten that mentor. But my boss was very clever.
Talking about moving jobs, a lot of people want to move jobs into multinational corporations, big tech. They want to go work for Amazon, but they're finding it hard. A lot of people I talk to, they're like, yeah, I've been applying to Amazon for the last 5 years. I haven't cracked an interview, or I've applied to Google 4 times and gotten 4 rejections. How do you actually break into these?
So the number one way to break into any job is to go completely around the application system through a networking connection. Forbes put out research in 2023 is the most recent place I've seen this exact data. And it talked about leadership positions, but this doesn't mean VP positions. It means manager, it means senior this, senior that. 80% of those positions are never published.
So I don't even really do a hello or anything, by the way. So.
No, it's totally fine.
Okay. So Ethan, I've been following your career, and I kind of had my mind blown when I saw that you make $750,000 part-time in retirement last year. How are you doing now?
Well, I'm happy to say that I just finished my taxes for this year, and that number's risen again to about 950. So, and still very part-time. I traveled about 5 months last year, and I'm gonna travel about 5 months this year.
That's crazy. What does part-time mean? And does that mean still 40 hours a week? Because I imagine VP at Amazon is quite a bit more.
Yeah, it's a fair question. I don't track my hours exactly, but it's definitely way less than 40 hours a week. And it's also some weeks I do almost nothing. But I would say I work 35 weeks of the year. I work 20 to 30 hours during those weeks. So it's like half of a 40-hour full-time job and like a third of a big tech leadership job.
That's incredible leverage. And how does the pie chart break down of your revenue?
Yeah, it's shifted a little bit over time because when I began, I was doing a lot of coaching. And so it was like give an hour, get paid for an hour. And I still do some coaching, but I found the biggest leverage is from teaching courses. And the reason I went into teaching courses was I had way too many people asking me for coaching. So it would have become a 40-hour job, then a 60-hour job. And I realized many of the questions were similar. So why don't I build some classes to address those? The other thing I added was a newsletter. And so newsletter was a way to go, I sort of started sharing my expertise on LinkedIn. I built a big LinkedIn following, became a top voice, but LinkedIn is limited to 3,000 characters. It's very short form, like 500 words. So I added a newsletter. So that 950 is maybe 150 from the newsletter, another maybe 150 from coaching, and the vast majority, 600 plus, is from teaching classes.
So that's an amazing income to have part-time for anybody. How do you generate this leverage? What does the team around you look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have a chief operating officer. His name's Jason Jung. He is a young man who also worked at Amazon, but we didn't know each other. He came to me and asked if he could help. We started the newsletter together, which he was very passionate about. And then he grew into helping with all phases of my business.
Today's episode is brought to you by Maven. The problem with most courses online, like Udemy, is there's no live component, and the instructors aren't experts in their fields, they're professors. At Maven, you get direct live access to experts and operators from the world's best tech companies. You can't get that access anywhere else, in any university, and you usually can't find them on YouTube either. I've featured so many of Maven's experts in the newsletter and podcast for that reason. To help you out, I've put together a collection of courses I recommend at maven.com/x/Aakash. Gibson AI, the future of backend development. Imagine designing, deploying, and scaling your database as effortlessly as having a conversation. Gibson AI is your AI-powered database engineer. In just minutes, you can chat with Gibson to create production-grade data models, connect your frontend directly to your Gibson-built database, or drop the API specs into Cursor, v0, or Bolt to build a full-stack application seamlessly. From idea stage to millions of users, Gibson scales with you. Gibson optimizes your database as you grow and enables easy schema updates and migrations. So head over to gibsonai.com/Aakash.
My other main team member is an editor. So I have an editor that I pay basically to make my writing better, my newsletter writing, my online writing. I write everything myself, but I let him clean it up and polish it because everyone benefits from editing. There then is a freelance team, for things like video editing, but really the other people that are involved deeply is I now teach 2 classes with co-instructors. So the $950 I made this year is after paying them their share of classes. And so I see that as a growth strategy because it's fun. It allows me to broaden my offering and to collaborate with other people, which makes it enjoyable. One of my rules is more or less I don't do anything that isn't fun. In other words, since I don't desperately need more income than that, who does? If it's not fun, I don't do it.
And I think that a lot of people might be salivating at the earnings per hour that you have, but I don't think that really tells the whole picture. The picture really emerges when you look back at the leverage you created through your 30-year career. And you use this framework called the magic loop to grow your career, and you've been teaching other people the magic loop. I love this framework. Can you break this down for us?
Sure. So the magic loop is a name I came up with when I realized that what I had done in my own career was iterate through 5 steps. And the first step is you have to be doing your current job well. The one time your manager doesn't want to give you more, if you go and say, oh, how can I help? Or what more could I do? Or could I work on this project? The one time a manager doesn't welcome help is when what they need to tell you is actually, I need you to do your job right and stop, being late or being slow or being sloppy or whatever they feel the problem is. So step 1 is do your job well and confirm that with your leadership. Say, hey, my review looked good. Am I doing basically a good job? Then you get into the meat of the loop. Step 2 is you go and ask your manager, hey, what could I do to help you? What are you worried about? What do you need? How could I contribute to the success of the group? Now, I keep these steps really simple because step 3 is simply do it. Whatever they ask you to do, it may not be the most glamorous work, but the one way to hurt yourself is to go offer help to someone and then say, oh, I didn't actually mean that, right? If you offer help and they say, well, we need you to say, I'm an engineer. A lot of people don't like to do maintenance work. Well, we need you to fix some bugs or to upgrade this server, saying, oh, I didn't mean that. That's what they need, so you do it. The point of this is to earn trust. These 2 steps earn trust with your manager or build a relationship because people help those who help them. So then what you do is eventually you go back to your manager and you say, hey, I have this goal. I want to get promoted. I want to learn a new technology. I want to change from engineering to product management, whatever it is. How can I keep helping you, but in a way that will take me down this path? Can you help give me ideas or things that you need, but that will take me somewhere I need to go? And most good managers, most even moderate managers, can recognize that there's a deal here, which is you're helping me, now you're asking me to help you a little. Let's work together. I don't think you have to have a great manager. We can talk later about potentially exploitative managers, but the point is now they give you something to do that's also in line with your career. And at this point, you're at the famous part of the loop that's on the shampoo bottle, which is lather, rinse, repeat. You just keep on this cycle of learn how to do the new task well, confirm you're doing it well, ask for more, do more. And at some point, if your goal is promotion or role change, you do have to have the discussion with your manager. Okay, how will we know when I'm there? Like, when does the thing happen? But this process is what I used all through my career. I stumbled on it a year into my first job. I didn't have a name for it. It wasn't formal in my mind, but I started using it, had a tremendously successful career, and then I started using it to develop my key reports, and it worked for them. And that's where I realized, oh, there's really something here I can share with others.
So if we start at step one and maybe see where people might fail, right? I think a lot of product managers and growth people, they're just struggling even to get that good performance review. They might be like most of us, if we look at the percentile distributions of how these reviews are done, most of us get that okay review, right? That's where the bell curve is highest. So really step one is you need to be getting a performance review somewhere in the high end of the bell curve. How does someone who's been maybe in their career 7-8 years, they've typically mainly been at the middle of the curve. Once they're 3 or 4 years into the role, they finally get to the top of the curve. How do they actually kind of accelerate their path to being able to ask for more?
Yeah. So one thing I want to be clear is I can completely answer that, and I will, but you don't have to be at the very top. You have to be doing a very good job to where your leader doesn't feel they need to list a bunch of corrections, where they're willing to trust you with more. So that might be 60th percentile, 70th, 80th, but you don't have to be top 10% for this to work. Now, how do you get there? I'm a huge proponent of asking for feedback, and not only maybe from your manager, but from other stakeholders. You have to be open to improving yourself. I guess I was automatically into relentless self-improvement. What can I do better? What can I learn? What am I not contributing? So I would build a relationship with my manager. And the way to ask for feedback, there's a few key tricks here. First is try not to surprise your manager. So as a manager, if you come into me, Aakash, and you're like, hey, it's our one-on-one. Normally we talk about status, but this week I'd like to know top 3 things I can improve. You're catching me cold, and I'm like, I don't know. I haven't thought about it. But I don't want to say that to you. So instead, I'm rolling my eyes up my head and coming up with 3 quick things. Give your manager a week of warning. Say, hey, the next time we meet, I'd love to get some feedback. Then the next thing is to make sure they know that you're going to take it well. So I once had a very senior person ask me for feedback. So I gave her some feedback, and the first thing she did was start arguing with me. Now, this didn't change my mind about the feedback. Instead, it changed my mind about her. I went from being impressed that she was looking for feedback to being like, oh, so not only do you have the problem I told you, you also have a problem that you can't take feedback well. So now you have 2 problems. So you actually went from 1 problem to 2. People ask me and they say, but what if I don't agree with the feedback? What if I don't think it's right? Do I just take it? Well, sort of. All feedback, the first words out of your mouth should be thank you. And the reason for that is whether you agree with it or not, it is their perception and they've made you aware of it. And you want them to keep doing that because you can't fix what you don't know about. So you definitely say thank you. Then if you don't agree with it or don't understand it, the next thing you can say is, oh, I'm struggling. I trust you, but I'm struggling to understand that. Can you give me an example? Can you walk me through where you've seen that? Or the next time you notice it, can you bring it to my attention? And what you're looking for here is many managers have a perception in their mind, but they haven't done the work to pin it down to specifics. So you get them to do that over time so that you can address it. Now, of course, it can still be possible that you just don't agree. What you need to do there is talk to a couple other people in your life, because if your manager tells you, hey, you ramble on in meetings, and your thought is, no, I'm super crisp. Well, asking a couple colleagues, you'll find out real quick what the truth is. So that's how you ask, how do you improve your review? It's finding out what your leader values, both in terms of what do they want more of and what do they want less of. So the other key mistake I see is people are working really hard, but it turns out they're not working on what the manager actually cares about. So they've decided that they should learn a new language, or they've decided they should build a whizzy AI tool for some purpose, but the manager wishes they were doing something else. And that's where I'm such a hard worker can lead to a disconnect in the review.
So the next step is asking for more responsibilities. And what are the right people and types of scope and way to handle this conversation?
Yeah, so I focus a lot of, I keep talking about a manager. I focus a lot of what I've said on your manager because your manager normally controls your pay, your assignments, your potential. They're at least the starting point of promotions. You can talk to other people as well, but the reason you normally start with your manager is they're the ones in the position to tell you both what they need and to reward you if you help them. So I go to them, and what I want to say is I generally start with a summary of the obvious, which is hopefully the obvious. Hey, you've told me I'm doing really well, and I feel like I'm on top of my work, so I have a little extra time. I don't make it sound like I'm open to do, 60 more hours of work, but what what do you need that I could help you with? Now, there are two more advanced forms of this, depending on your relationship. The second form, that's a little more advanced, is as opposed to making it the manager's problem, you can say to them, I was wondering if it would be valuable if I did this thing or that thing. You can make a suggestion. And the way I do that is I say, I was noticing, we have problems with our on-call, or we don't have enough data for our next round of product features. And I was going to build a deep dive data tool. Would that be what you'd like me to do, or is there something else? So I give them the chance to say, yeah, do that, or no, actually, I need this. The most advanced version, when you have a great relationship, often when you're a little more senior, is you just are going to your manager and saying, hey, I wanted to let you know I saw this problem, I fixed it, and I'm giving you an update. So at this point, you truly have, I call it the magic loop. You've become, from my perspective as a manager, you've become magical because I'm not doing anything and you're seeing problems, fixing them, and letting me know. And now I'm like, oh my God, how do I clone you? And that's where you want to get.
What's interesting as I reflect that back on my own career is probably where I saw the fastest growth was that most advanced stage where I was going out and basically telling them I did this extra work and solved this problem for them. And often I'd go tell like a skip level. But interestingly, I think there's also a lot of merit to that middle approach you just mentioned because especially if you're not 100% certain this extra work is going to yield a positive result, you're bringing them into the conversation of, hey, I'm going to be doing this extra work. Does this make sense? Do you have any feedback or adjustments to my approach?
Yeah, and that's why that last approach I say is the most advanced, and you really need to know your manager because the downside of, hey, I did this thing is they might say, oh my God, you did what? Right? Like if you miss the mark or maybe don't know something and so you cause damage, you're going to set yourself back. And so there's this happy medium where you have to learn your managers, and not just your manager's quirks or something, but how they think, how your skip level thinks, the goals of your organization. And that's a learning process. And that's why I tell people, for people earlier in their career, start with asking how you can help, and then suggesting how you can help, and then ultimately just doing what needs to be done. And that's a progression of judgment.
And what I also noticed is that the more senior I got, the more expectation there was that I was doing that advanced stuff without them. It feels like once you reach the director and VP level, your competition is constantly solving problems outside of their scope. So it's kind of incumbent upon you to not just be solving one, but two or three every quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, there are relatively few directors and VPs because not that many are needed and they're expensive. And so they better be really high leverage. And you're absolutely right that expectations go up. Something that I've talked about before and is also common in other companies. Jeff Bezos didn't hold one-on-ones with his direct reports. I understand that Jensen at NVIDIA doesn't either, but these are incredibly senior people. So he, the idea was, look, I'm not going to have a weekly meeting with you to chit chat. You have goals, go execute on them. If you have a problem or you want my input, schedule a meeting about that problem, but we're not just going to have like a check-in. You're beyond that, I'm beyond that. None of us have time for it. And that works well with very senior employees. But you can imagine that wouldn't work well with someone straight out of college where you're like, hey, welcome to Meta. Figure out what to do and I'll see you at the annual review. That would be a disaster. So it's this, again, progression of seniority.
Yeah, progression of seniority and also probably even tenure, which is interesting. Like once I was a director at a company for 3 years, I knew by the back of my hand, like my CEO is going to love if I can accomplish X. But if 6 months in, I might have actually made a misstep. So it might have been better if I checked in with some of my VPs. And I also love the idea of checking in sort of for this extra work with peers of your manager. At least that's what I used to do a lot if I reflect back of like not just my VP, but the adjacent VP of extra things to be pulling off.
Absolutely. Because sometimes what you're looking for magically, of course, is either the things that are low effort, high reward, or that are really hard for some other group, but are really easy for your group, because that's where you're going to get that modest time investment, huge output. And a broader perspective, that's why I said I talk a lot about the manager, but as you get more senior, you're looking more broadly. You're picking your head up and saying, okay, I'm a member of this team, but this team is part of a larger organism. And what's the real goal of that organism? I'm not just looking small, I'm looking big. And so I think that's what you were saying. By talking to the peers, you're getting that larger viewpoint.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like the magic loop aperture that worked best for me was take a look at my manager. We've emphasized him. He's probably the 80/20, or she hopefully is the 80/20. But then as you're filling out that 20%, who are their peers and who's their boss? And when we're talking about product managers, usually the CEO cares about the product. So what does the CEO think as well?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Of course, you and I worked in big tech companies, so the CEOs are very product oriented. Um, but you have CEOs that are finance oriented. Of course, you have ones that are tech oriented, marketing, sales. Um, Understanding that lens of how does your C-suite think and how do they make decisions? I talked to a good friend who's worked in several of the big tech companies at the sort of EVP level, and he explained that in one company the decisions were technical, in one company the decisions were financial, and in one company they were sort of analytical and storytelling, like how good was your narrative for your idea. And I think this goes to your point of you have to learn the culture enough to know what your VP or CEO is going to love.
So, can you give us some examples of? You mentioned that you worked with people who are on your teams. What were some examples of people who are on your teams and how you guys implemented, or they, I guess, implemented this magic loop framework?
Yeah. So normally that would begin with very ambitious people coming to me and saying, I want to get to the next level. So I'd love to say they came and said, how can I help you? But often they came and said, I want to get to the next level. And so we would start a conversation of, okay, what does that take? What's that going to look like? And we would make some form of deal. I'm a bit of a deal maker in this sense where they would agree to step up and take on a hard challenge that needed to be done. And I would agree that if they could accomplish that, it represented next level work, and I would package up that proof and help them get to the next level. So, an example is my manager said, look, your team costs too much. I had a team that was growing very rapidly. Your team is too expensive. We need to move part of it offshore. Um, I'm not going to tell you where to move it. You can go anywhere in the world as long as it's cheaper. And so I knew nothing about running offshore offices at that time. But I reached out to somebody who I knew was ambitious, and I said, look, I need to open an office somewhere. Um, Amazon has a big presence in India. Would you be interested in moving back to India? This gentleman was Indian, moving back to India and starting an office there. And he said, yeah, sounds great. I can take my kid home. He can meet his grandparents. Maybe he can learn some Hindi. It'll be awesome. So we set up a process where he would go build an entire office, make it work, set up all the operational procedures, and I would present that internally. He was a senior manager, so kind of an M2 in Meta terms, L7 at Amazon or Google. um, I would present that as a director level accomplishment. This guy went 12 hours around the world from Seattle. He attached himself to an existing Amazon building, but stood up a whole new function, is managing hundreds of people there, is saving us all this money. He's a director. And that's what, in fact, we did. It took 2 years, and it certainly took him learning different skills because he was an engineering leader. Now he needed to be both a site leader, and a lot of the functions we put under him were operational. So it was a large set of uh, low-level hourly employees doing manual labor or near manual labor. Uh, and so he did run a tech team, but he had to learn all those skills and demonstrate them. And then I was able to showcase that. And that's that loop between the two of us. Now, of course, the most common thing people ask is, well, how do I get a manager like you? Not every manager will do that. It's true, but a lot of managers, I got to VP through a similar process when I was a director, forming a similar process upward with my Amazon vice president. Um, so I can share that if you'd like, but there are plenty of people who will do this. You have to find a manager that's willing to invest in you.
So let's start there. How did you go from Amazon director to VP? Because that's a pretty important jump in anyone's career. I think you tell us, but from what I would understand, I would guess the compensation trajectory 3 or 4X at that point with stock compensation, and just in general probably makes kind of your reputation for the rest of your career.
Yeah, it certainly was, my last promotion, and I was fine with that. So how I went is there's a funny beginning to the story. I had a very good VP, and I was a director under that VP, and I was a very new director, so I was far from vice president. I talked to him about my career, and I said, I think the way I see Amazon working, I have to move to another group and show that I can be successful in multiple groups. And he said, no, you don't have to do that. And then he came back to me a few weeks later and said, actually, I talked to the SVP. You were right. Really, to grow your career here, you need to move. And I'm like, okay, well, good to know. So I spent all this time selecting the next VP I wanted to work for. I went to work for him, and 6 weeks later, he was chosen to be Jeff Bezos' assistant. So he was plucked out of role, and I got, let's call it a random replacement. Like there was a reorg. So I had done all this work to select the perfect boss. Um, and in comes this gentleman, and it's not an auspicious start to the discussion. He said, look, I'm busy running, he ran consumer electronics at Amazon, the retail category. I was owned video game software, like building our internal video game sales platform at that time. And he said, I don't know anything about what you do, and I didn't really want your group, but we'll make it work. And I'm like, oh God. But what was an advantage is he was not a software engineer. And the place I realized, to the point of the magic loop, I could help him is he had no senior software leaders at all. He had some little tiny software groups that had first level managers.
This episode is brought to you by Adio, the next generation CRM. Imagine a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and actually intuitive. Adio makes that a reality. As I've profiled in the Product Growth newsletter, setting up Adio takes less than a minute, and within seconds of syncing your email and calendar, you'll see your relationships in one place, enriched with valuable data, including things like relationship strength. Adio lets you build Zapier-style automations, create powerful reports, and works for any go-to-market motion, from PLG to sales-led. Adio is designed for the next era of companies like yours. And companies like yours shouldn't have to deal with inflexible, one-size-fits-all CRMs. Join industry leaders like 11 Labs, Replicate, and Modal. Head to adio.com/productgrowth and you'll get 15% off your first year.
And he was a VP who didn't really know anything about software, or not that much, and didn't want to. He was an operations guru. He wanted to streamline how stuff came into the warehouse and went out of the warehouse at a profit. So I offered, I will take on all your tech challenges. And he started moving people under me, and I had this random collection, like a Frankenstein monster, where I owned video games and software, and I owned the software that we use to do what's called reverse logistics, so handle returns and refurbish them. And I ended up owning the software we used to sell. At that time, Amazon was very new to B2B. So I owned the software, or came to own the software for selling things in quantities to businesses, which is not really what Amazon did at the time. Now they do. So I got this hodgepodge, but what I was doing was taking problem after problem off his plate while growing my sphere of influence. Then Jeff Bezos, well, we wanted to build an app store. Jeff Bezos wanted to compete with Google on the Android platform. We made a mistake, by the way. The Amazon App Store now, 14 years later, has been shut down recently. But Amazon made a mistake of thinking that because Android was open, technically on paper, it was actually an open ecosystem. This is not true. It wasn't true. It isn't true. But we didn't realize that. So we started building an app store to compete. Well, that project started to take on a life of its own and really grow. And so that's the team that exploded, that I ultimately had to send part of to India. But I was developing this relationship as my VP's go-to tech leader. So as that App Store team grew from 100 to 200 to 300, I was reaching VP scope, and I could have the discussion with him. Okay, I'm now 5 years into this, a director. How do we get this done? And he invested back in me. He went and got me a senior vice president, a technical senior vice president, as a mentor. So he made a call and said, hey, I've got a tech leader who's getting ready for VP. Will you spend some time with him to get to know him? And that was a critical step, because I probably couldn't have gotten that mentor. But my boss was very clever. That mentor was in the room for the decision. So when my manager ultimately wrote up my case for VP, it went to all the senior vice presidents, and there's my mentor in the room, able to speak to knowing to me, yet still be independent. This is one of the better chess moves I've seen, because even though I have no idea what exactly happened in the room, I'm sure having a independent person say, oh yeah, I know Ethan, we've talked, he this, he that, was probably pretty influential in my getting the promotion. So that's the story. And I was 6 years as a director. I can tell you, because I studied many Amazon promotions, that made me average. The fastest I saw was a couple of individual rock stars who went from director to VP in 3 years. And I know several who were 9 or 10 years. And so 6 was the average. I neither beat nor was behind it. But, the competition is stiff at that level. So I actually feel pretty good that I was on track.
And if we tie this back to the magic loop, The really crucial element here, right, is you taking on that extra responsibility within that Frankenstein organization, you helping him, and then we help people who help us.
That's exactly right. Because remember, he began by saying, I don't really know anything about what you do, and I didn't want your group. It's transparent. I wasn't looking for this, but we'll figure it out. And that's how it began. And by the end of our relationship, we were traveling to conferences together and going rock climbing on those trips. So we had gone from, I don't know you and I don't really want your areas, but that's now my job, so I'll do it, to a personal relationship and of course an invested, mutually beneficial professional relationship. And that mutually beneficial is the key. I was making him look better and his life better, and he was helping me achieve goals. We were symbiotic, and so he was growing in his role because it's almost certainly the case that the VP above you has some sort of ambitions. And so how do you support those?
We talked a little bit about the timelines there, and I think that's another interesting point. Do you need to want to be on the fast timeline? Is the normal timeline okay? And can you still be implementing the magic loop on a more normal pace?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a big proponent, of course, of seeking fast growth in the sense of high growth environments. Because one problem I didn't have at that time in Amazon, which I would have now, and I think the same is very true of Meta across the same period of history, there wasn't some notion of, oh, we have too many VPs, we can't have any more. Um, there wasn't a notion of, well, there's no spot available, or we're trying to flatten the organization. And so I do think high growth is important in your environment because it creates opportunities. Over the 9 years from when I began to when I finished and got my VP promotion, my team went from 6 people my very first year as a senior manager to 800. So 120-fold. Well, that's not happening today in the big tech companies. And so would I be able to do the same thing regardless of my own performance? I'm not sure I would. But what I tell people is you have to have a plan and work towards that plan. But yes, be patient. True executive promotions are very rare. How many can there possibly be? You generally might go to director, then to vice president, then there might be an EVP or SVP level at some companies, and then you're the chief product officer or whatever. And often companies, unless they're huge, don't even have all of those levels. So we're only talking about 2 to 3 promotions in that part of your career. So if they each take 5 years, that's 15 years. Many people will work from 20 to 60. 15 years of trajectory across a 40-year career. It's great if you can go faster. I do tell everyone, there is an instant path to CEO, just found your own company. Right? Well, I mean, for the people who really are impatient, come up with your idea, go raise venture and give it a go, and you will get the big title. But it comes with a lot of other problems.
And speaking up for the young parents like myself with young kids who don't actually want to work that hard, a little secret for you all, I usually also work about 35 hours a week, so a little less than 40 in my current lifestyle. For people like myself who we want to do a great job, we do want to grow, just I want to grow this business, or if I was a PM, I'd want to grow as a PM.
Yep.
How can we realistically implement the magic loop?
Well, couple things. First, leverage in your tasks is key. I often ask people, today we're recording this on a Monday, so it's a little bit of a cheat. I'll use a different day. But if I ask you what you did last Wednesday morning, do you know off the top of your head? You don't. And so if you had done something really dramatic, you'd be like, oh yeah, on Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. Most of the work we do is relatively rote and low value. So one way is to get really hone in on what are the things that are going to move the needle forward, and everything else either don't do, or to be really honest, half-ass it. And what I mean is, if it's not that important, get rid of that perfectionist tendency and just get it done and move on, and save your perfectionism for the thing that really matters. So that's a piece of it. The other piece is you may have to go back to your manager and use the following language, which is to say, hey boss, I'm loving what I'm doing with you. It seems like you are too. I'd like to do more, but unfortunately, I'm really burdened with fill in the thing you want to get rid of. Is there anyone else who could do that? Do we still need it? Is there anyone else who could do it? Could we give it to the intern? Could we delegate it, etc.? But you're helping your manager and other people aren't. And so they're usually better managers are very willing to find ways to free their stars to do the star level work. Not because they're generous, but because it's in their best interest, right? You assume you have this pattern where you've used the loop, and you came and helped me with something I needed, then you came and helped me with something else I needed, then you did it a third time, and now you're saying, hey, I'd like to do number 4, but I can't. Can you help me out with that? It's in their self-interest to be like, yeah, I will find someone to give that to. Of course, you can always automate it. Sometimes you can just neglect it. So it's between picking the right things to do and getting rid of the things not to do, and being a little bit, pushy about that.
And what was your personal approach to hours and work life? How did you handle it all?
Well, no one does it perfectly. I did work more. So when I was working at Amazon, I worked between 55 and 60 hours, I think, was my normal week. So I was not, I hear people say, oh, I work 80 hours, I work 90 hours, 100, and I wonder, there isn't really enough time to sleep, eat, and shower left, so I'm doubtful, a little bit, I think you're telling yourself stories. But I actually forced myself to make a change, and what I did is very unusual. I got 3 jars. I had read about this. I got 3 jars. 1 jar was full of white marbles, 1 jar was full of black marbles, and the middle jar was empty. And every weekend, I was okay working hard in the week, but I would ask myself, this weekend, did I live my life the way I wanted, or did I just work on things I didn't want to do? And I would put a white marble in if the weekend was one I liked, and a black marble if I felt I was drug into just grinding away on more work. And that act of seeing black marbles accumulate, particularly when it's the 3rd weekend or 4th weekend in a row where you're like, oh, it was another weekend in the office. We change when we have a forcing function and when we have feedback. And that act of putting black marbles in the jar led me to change. So I kept these marble jars going for 5 or 6 years. And eventually I got to where I was putting almost nothing but white marbles in the jar because I had learned the skills and adapted my lifestyle. And so I stopped when it no longer was helpful. But that was my unusual technique. You can find your own technique, but you have to find a way to give yourself feedback and really measure, how did I do this week? Did I live the way I wanted? Did I prioritize? Did I get sucked into things? Did I make time for my family? And you can tune it. We can all tune, but it's not, there's no instant fix.
I love that marble concept. And I also think the leverage is so important, because when I look back at my own career, of course, I grew the fastest when I worked the hardest. What do you know? Like, that's kind of how the human just works. If we spend our time in some place, we're able to progress in that place. If we don't spend it in others, those areas, family, friends, relationships, whatever it might be, they tend to go stagnant. And so time is really where you drive progress, but not all time is the same. And do you feel like people need to think more, at least I do, that around how they also just come to show up for the time they have? Because one of my big unlocks was literally just meditating and doing yoga before work. I found that I controlled my emotions so well. So like one of the first things that happens when you get in a deep work block is you feel this stress response. I want to get distracted. I want to go respond to some Slack messages. Oh, my boss just emailed me. I could do that pseudo productive thing. But I found that like yoga and meditation in the morning, all of a sudden that stress response kicks up. I'm able to kind of control myself. Are those also key elements here?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of your mental game at work. And I meditate too. Maybe it doesn't sound like quite as much as you do. So, congratulations. I also do some yoga. So, I definitely affirm what you're practicing. There's a book I really like called Energy Rising by a neuroscientist, Dr. Julia DeGangi. But her point is condensed. It's for knowledge workers, our brain is our tool, and the brain you bring to your work matters. Is it quiet? Is it focused? Is it distracted by emotions? Are you fearful? Are you stressed? And of course, meditation is one excellent tool to reduce some of that. I have a big problem. You obviously know something about meditation with what's called monkey mind, of my mind wanting to go all different places like a monkey in a tree. Um, so that is how you get leverage. And there absolutely is truth to when you're doing your best work, you probably drop into what's called the flow state, where your productivity goes up. That's, of course, the state of being in the groove or in the zone where you lose track of time. The work feels effortless. And so setting up your work to allow you to get into those deep work blocks or those flow zones and stay in them, you'll get much more done in much less time. And so that is a way to get more leverage. I think the modern managerial office setting is very anti-focus. You're expected to be very responsive. You have your phone going, you have Slack going, you have email going, you have people walking in and out. Um, I think my talent in a lot of ways as a leader was that I was very good at handling quick. I was maybe better than other people at handling quick distractions. Um, and so I kind of saw myself as a big cross point switch, lots of things in and out, and I was able to function that way. It's not what I do now in sort of my new life. So depends on how much you're doing management and leadership versus how much you're doing focused work.
That's so true. As a management leadership, especially the bigger companies, I noticed. Like, I was a director of growth at a Series C, D, and E company. There, they were okay if, like, for 2 hours I had a deep work hold on my calendar. Shifted over to being a director at a public company, and all of a sudden, like, you can't take those deep work blocks. Everybody wants you to be responding, even if it's 7 a.m. on a Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't think that kind of work is super healthy. But yes, when I was at Amazon, my calendar was booked for sure every minute from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Those were kind of my in-office hours, and often was double or triple booked. So I would get to an hour, pull up my phone, and be like, "Oh, which of these three meetings am I going to?" Uh, and that meant that your actual work was pushed to off hours and weekends, which brings me back to the marble jar. So uh, managing those circumstances, look, I think that is somewhat the price of being a vice president in a big public company. Your time really isn't going to be your own, and you are going to be fragmented. I'm sure there are a few people out there who claim to be time ninjas, but I haven't seen it.
I think those are the harsh truths that people need to hear.
Yeah, look, I loved my work. I'm super proud of what I accomplished. It was challenging. and demanding, but it freed me to do, as you sort of mentioned, that's the career that set me up for what I do now. So I had a strategy early in life because I spent my first 12 years in startups, which is get rich in a startup, cruise from 35 on. That didn't happen, right? The startups I was a part of weren't the ones that went unicorn. So then I joined Amazon, and from 35 to 50, my strategy was collect the paycheck, bank it, and buy my freedom. And that did work. I was able to leave at 50 with the money I needed. And frankly, now the money I make now is because it's kind of easy to get. I'm offering services people are happy to pay for, um, so that's great. But I don't technically need it, and so I bought my freedom, and I did it with the 15 years of a little bit of grinding.
That was the segue, perfect segue from Magic Loop to broader career management, which is where I want to double click now because I think that playing chess with your career is not just about playing chess in the Magic Loop with your current job, but also thinking about all of the other jobs out there. Personally, if you people would examine my career really closely, I even made some of my level jumps as I was switching jobs. So I might have been, for instance, I was a lead product manager at Epic Games, a $30 billion company. Then I joined a $15 billion company as a director. So there's things you can do like that where you can potentially play the chess game. You, as you mentioned, stayed quite a while at Amazon, but before that you had a variety of different VP and startup roles.
Yes.
What do you think about the chess playing strategies people should be thinking about when it comes to job hopping?
Yeah. So I was at Amazon at a completely unique time, where the company was growing so fast that I had tons of internal opportunities. As best I can tell, when I joined Amazon, it had 14,000 employees, and when I left, it had 1.4 million. So the company grew 100-fold. In that kind of environment, I didn't need to leave in order to have new and different opportunities. I was able to do that internally. At the same time, to be very honest with you, I probably passed up a couple of further jumps. I was, for example, recruited for a role at Meta that would have still been a VP role, but would have, the pay would have been substantially more, and it might have gone further than that. I turned it down because at that point in my life, moving was inconvenient, was going to be painful to my family and disruptive on that level. So part of your chess game is what is your freedom to go where the jobs are. Now, recently there's been more opportunity for remote work, so maybe you can play chess with a new degree of freedom and not have to relocate. Going all the way to your point, though, early in my career, I was very typical in that I moved jobs about every 2 years. And that's because in startups, once you've done the job, there unless there's radical growth, the next available job may be somewhere else. And so I absolutely move between companies to get opportunity. I think that's great. The question you have to ask yourself is, what's the impact on your personal life, and are you okay with that? Also, you are going to reset that magic loop trust point. If you've built that relationship with a manager where they're really investing in you, um, you're going to have to rebuild that. And that's a trade-off. It can be a good move, but you might also end up with a manager that isn't a match for you. It's all the typical things of risk. So I think it's risk reward. Um, when I would move for sure is when you start getting messages like, we'd love to promote you, but Sarah and Bill are both in line in front of you. That's a scarcity thing and a tenure thing where you can't do anything but wait. I would move in those situations. I would move when you're no longer learning, and I would move when your manager isn't really investing in you, or you can't get that relationship. So those are three different times: not learning, no growth, or a tenure-based environment that they're just telling you, oh yeah, you're great, but give it 5 years. I'll give it 5 years somewhere else.
So, really keeping your eye on what are the promotion opportunities and what is the level of trust I've built. And it sounds like if you're in a low trust situation, then the bar to move should be pretty low. Like if you're 2 years in and you just got a new manager who doesn't even like you, that's a great time to start looking.
Absolutely. I believe I can build trust with lots of people, but it's going to take time. And that's a great time to pull your head up and see what's out there. And again, this also comes back to, do you have a lifestyle or a situation where how big can you open your lens? Are you willing to move across the country? Are you willing to move across the world? Or do you have maybe children who are in important high school years and you need to make a trade-off there? Those are choices that are individual to different people and families, but absolutely you can grow by moving. You can also, though, with the magic loop, grow pretty fast where you're at. Because the thing I point out about the magic loop is most people aren't doing it. And the way I know that is I've surveyed over 1,000 managers where I've been teaching in different rooms, and I just ask them, hey, how often do people come to you and offer help on your team? How often does somebody walk into your office and say, hey, I'm on top of my work. What could I do to really help you? And they universally tell me two things. It's rare and they really love it. And so that shows the opportunity to stand out very quickly if you can do that.
I think it's all about being on the right side of that percentile distribution of performance. If you're in that 50 to 100, it sounds like consider the more magic loop stay at your company strategy. But if you're in that below 0 to 50% performance, if for some reason you just weren't a fit for this company, then it might be a good idea to look externally.
Yeah, definitely. The only thing there is you got to make sure that it's a company fit, not something you're doing. Because if you have a performance issue that's exposed itself, but you're not addressing it, it will probably follow you to the next company. So I tell a story. I have someone I coach. Uh, he's on his third company while I've been coaching him. He came to me, I guess, he came to me after he had been fired from his first big tech company. He then joined another company. And at that company, through the tenure of our coaching, he repeated the problems that he came to me about, and he was fired from there. So he's now at his third big tech company. So, hey, good for him. He keeps getting the jobs. But those same problems have come up again. And finally seeing him for the third time, he's like, okay, it really is me. And now he's wrestling with, what do I do? Because these things that keep getting me in trouble are deeply ingrained. Like I'm really struggling. I see the problem, but he's struggling to change. That's a separate issue. But the point is, problems follow you. And so, yes, if it's not a fit, get out, get a fit. You're probably familiar with the Almanac of Naval Ravikant. Is that a book you know?
Of course. I watch every Naval podcast religiously, especially his latest on All In.
Yeah. So I love that book. And it talks about how if you're doing work you love, no one can beat you at it, because for you it's play and joy. And for other people it's work. And no one can, like if I'm playing, I'll play all day and love it and still be happy, and you're grinding. And so try to find that job that aligns with work you would gladly do all day for free. And uh, one of the ironies is almost everything I do to earn that money we talked about, the 950,000, I would do for free. It's just I've found I don't have to do it for free. So I'm not a fool. I'll take the money, but I love the work anyway.
That I think I couldn't echo more. Like, I love doing what I do now. I think just shaping your job, maybe your career aspirations, maybe even your monetary aspirations in the short term for what you really love can give you what you want monetarily in the long term.
Absolutely. Look, part of my history is I worked at Twitch, the video game streaming company acquired by Amazon. And of course, there's people there making lots of money just chatting with other people or streaming video games. Now, not everybody, but there's a set of people who make very good money, multiple millions a year to even tens of millions a year, playing video games for a living. If you really love something and you're good at it and you find your niche, you can earn a living doing almost anything. You're probably also, because you're also familiar with Kevin Kelly and his famous article, "A Thousand True Fans." If you're not, his article said, look, anyone can make a job if they can just have 1,000 true fans who will give them $100 a year for whatever it is they're doing, because $100 and 1,000 fans, 100,000, now you have a living. So 1,000 true fans in a world of several billion people available online should be possible in just about anything you want to do if you have a little bit of expertise and passion. So I do think it's possible for many people to craft their own living.
So, for those who are staying in the corporate grind, they're working on their resumes. It's probably the first thing you pop up to do when you say, okay, I'm going to pop up my head, I'm going to refresh my LinkedIn, I'm going to update my resume. I really love your tips on resumes, watched a couple of your sessions on that. So, I want you to break that down for us first. How can someone build out, if they're popping their head up for a job search, a great resume?
Yeah, so I'm a nerd about this. Curiously, the very first recorded resume in history came from Leonardo da Vinci. He's the first person we have recorded history of him sending someone a list of their prior career accomplishments when seeking work. So the resume hasn't really changed since Leonardo, right? It's a list of, this is what I've done and won't you hire me? But we've learned a few things about how to improve it. So the number one thing I see people do wrong in a resume is, you mentioned a lot of the people listening to this will be between, say, 6 and 15 years in their career. At that point, what they fall into is they're still having a college level resume where they're listing what they've done. I built this. I wrote the BRD, the business requirements for this product. I was a part of Project X. They're listing their work. That makes them quite literally a worker. What they're not listing is their impact, their decisions. They're not finding a way to say, drove the design of, with the result that it shipped on this date and made this much money. So I tell people, always get to the impact. What work did you do? Sure, but what did it result in? Because results are what we look for in higher level people. We don't want to hire someone to do work. You've heard this, I'm sure. We're trying to hire someone to solve a problem. A person doesn't wake up and say, oh, I'm going to open a new position because I need more work done. What they do is they say, oh, wow, that project is a dumpster fire. I need somebody to fix it. Or we want to capture this new market. Who can I hire to capture it? And so the resume has to convey that you've done those kinds of things that had that kind of impact. That's the number one single thing, is give the impact. The second thing I say, and not everybody agrees with this, but I feel very strongly about it, is say at the top of your resume what you want to do. Some people like to leave their resume very open and be like, well, accomplished, high performing, product manager seeks new role. I prefer to say senior product manager seeking director of product management opportunity. And the reason is, on the recruiting side, I'm hiring for some role. And I get 2 resumes. One of them says, oh, hey, I'm a senior product manager, interested in new opportunities. I don't know if you want to be a director. I don't, versus the other one, it's a very easy sort for me. The job title, the role I have is director, and you say you want it. I put you in the consider further pile because, and so for me, that's an easy sort. What people are afraid of is they need a job or they want a job and they're afraid of ruling anything out. So they want to write this huge open thing. But what that means is by not being specialized on anything, you're actually not the best person for anything. And I see you nodding because specificity matters, and we both know this. That's my second thing. The third piece of resumes is too many words. Um, Remember, the manager or the recruiter are skimming. And a lot of people, when they write their resumes, they want to include everything they ever did in all this detail because they have this fear that the one thing they leave out will be what would have gotten them the job. Or they have another belief, which is, if only you knew about me, of course you'd want to hire me. So they want to tell their whole life story. But that's not how a resume works. The person is just making a decision, call you or not. And so I tell people to think in tweets. What are the tweets that are going to get people to click the follow button? And you want those impact statements to jump out. And so those are my big 3, which is don't let volume get in the way of your top accomplishments. If I wanted to get a job with you, I'd rather you know my top 3 accomplishments than my whole work history. Because if those accomplishments, you're like, okay, wow, then you'll dig deeper. But if those get buried in all the things I'm trying to tell you about my life story, you may never see them or recognize them. So I can go on and on about other resume tuning, but those are the big 3. If people use fewer words, get to the impact, say what they want to do, they'll probably, what I tell people is at that point, you're better off moving on from your resume to networking.
Staying on the thinking and tweet points, when I was driving in the car with my wife this morning talking about our upcoming podcast, I told her exactly that he is really good at writing about career topics in tweet viral ways, tweet friendly ways. There's so many of your one-line hooks that I'm just visualizing now that maybe we'll throw up on screen for folks if they're watching on YouTube. How do you think in tweets and apply that to a resume?
I guess the way I think of it in tweets is I start again with what was the actual impact or outcome? And then what are the fewest words I need to say to explain to justify that I really did that? To justify or to give the person the data. So, my resume is on my website and it's some other places, but I have statements that are built and led 800-person team to ship the Amazon App Store, enabling Kindle tablet sales. Like a complete statement that tells what I did, gives numbers, because people believe numbers. There's a weird thing that happens in our head. If I say I led a big team, you're like, well, what's big? But if I say 753 people, now you're like, okay, that's a specific number. You must have done it. And then I carry it through, though, to what was the end business impact. And in fact, in the example I just gave you, if I were to rewrite that verbally here, I'd want to add a number at the end to say enabled a $3 billion Kindle tablet business, because that makes the impact. I've added now what was the real value. And shrink that down so that people can see it. And then again, if you were to look at my resume, I bold a few of the big fancy numbers to make them stick out. So maybe the 800-person team or 3 billion in revenue, because the great thing about the human eye is it goes automatically to bold. So you can kind of force the recruiter or manager to skim the way you want them to skim. They'll be drawn to the things you're choosing to highlight. And the brain, they really don't have any choice.
I think my favorite eye tracking study of resumes showed that people are in an F pattern and then to the bolds. And so I think that also speaks to the power of your tip to put what you want in the top left as a tweet.
Yep.
I want to be a director of product management, or even better, right? Now we're thinking in tweets. So I want to be a director of product management. It's kind of lengthy. Maybe it's like, aspiring director of PM with 14 years of PM experience. All of a sudden, you've just put in a number, you've given it some justification. We've kind of thought in a tweet. And so I think people might benefit from what we do every day, which is tweeting. Writing in tweets can actually help you sort of think in this natural way of compressing.
Yeah, and if I think of just a tidbit you mentioned earlier where you said you were a lead product manager at Epic, if I were trying to move to that first director role with your history, I might open that as successful lead product manager Epic, lead product manager at Epic Games, seeking director move where I can bring my expertise from shipping X to you. And now I'm telling you what I'm bringing you, and I've got a little credibility in there. It still all fits in one or two lines in a tweet, but I love the one of the things I tell people to put in their objective is less about what they're seeking and more about what they're going to do for the other person. Because see, as the reader, I'm not that interested in what I want to know. That your objective is the role I have. But as soon as I know that, I actually want to know what you're going to do for me. Because I have a problem to solve, where if it's all about, you see people write objectives that say, seeking a family-friendly, high-growth, inclusive environment where I can fulfill my potential as a director of product management. It's all about what you want. And of course, I was lilting my voice, which is sort of an unfair, making fun of the person writing that. But remember, the person hiring is trying to solve a problem. And so you have to convey to them that you get that taking a job is about helping them, not only getting what you want. And too many people open their resumes with all about what they want. And it's a balance. Of course, you should get some of the things you want. And you don't have to take the job, but you want them to offer it to you. So start with what you can bring.
Talking about moving jobs, a lot of people want to move jobs into multinational corporations, big tech. They want to go work for Amazon, but they're finding it hard. A lot of people I talk to, they're like, yeah, I've been applying to Amazon for the last 5 years. I haven't cracked an interview, or I've applied to Google 4 times and gotten 4 rejections. How do you actually break into these big tech things?
So the number one way to break into any job is to go completely around the application system through a networking connection. Forbes put out research in 2023 is the most recent place I've seen this exact data. And it talked about leadership positions, but this doesn't mean VP positions. It means manager, it means senior this, senior that. 80% of those positions are never published. So an opening occurs and they get filled through the network. Now, a second different 80% is of whatever positions get filled, 80% of the people filling them have a network connection to them. So both to find the positions and to get them, you need to be connected in some way. Why is this? Well, I'm going to put on my hat as a manager and show you how a leader thinks. I have a role. It's a big, important role on my team. I need to hire somebody for it. And I have 2 choices: people I know and people I don't. Now, from a risk viewpoint, who am I going to default to? Knowing someone gives such a huge leg up. Now, if I don't know them, the next best thing is, oh, you know them. But I trust you, and so you're a trust proxy because you're saying, well, I work for them at Epic, and I know them, and they did this and that, and you can trust they're going to be good. And that's why referrals are so powerful. When you try and crack any role, just applying, you're going against a sea of other applications. We hear how applicant systems are flooded with hundreds of applications per role. And I'd much rather pick someone I know. And not everyone will agree with this, but I think there's a lot of truth to it. If you gave me the choice between a potentially higher performer, but I don't know them, so there's more risk, and a very good performer that I know, and so I feel it's low risk, within reason, I will pick the known safe quantity because the downside is so painful. And this antagonizes the smart hard workers because they're like, wait, you walked away from the high merit person who got all the great marks in school. Yeah, I did, because reliability matters. And that's where networking referral.
I think networking referrals and also having that inbound engine, right? Because as you mentioned, those jobs are unpublished. A lot of the times they actually have an internal recruiting team, especially when we're talking executives, who specialize in finding those execs. And so you also need to make yourself a magnet for those recruiting teams. How do you do that?
Yeah, great question. And you're absolutely right. Inbound is wonderful. So, first thing is that all that work we just talked about on your resume should go on your LinkedIn because that's where the searching is happening now. Uh, you can only send out a paper resume when you're applying or later, yeah, paper or virtual. But LinkedIn, put all that same high impact clarity on LinkedIn, your tweet length. LinkedIn distracts people because it says they have a section called About. And so people tell you about themselves. But that's where you should be talking about what you want to do, that tweet that will attract attention. Um, so make your LinkedIn great. Second, though, network again. Building your network of people you know builds the set of people who can think about you. So I remind folks, networking has been made incredibly simple. You don't have to be an extrovert anymore. You can sit behind the safety of your keyboard, click connect with all your current and former colleagues, and then write one or two things on LinkedIn that will pop up in their feeds so they remember you're alive. And that's, again, laying the groundwork for that inbound. Beyond that, there is the careful nuance of how do you let people suspect you're available in a way you can still deny to your management chain, right? And this is, you don't want to turn on the open to work flag. It's a pretty, if you still want to keep your current job, because it's too much of a signal, but you do want to have some keywords that talk about how you're always interested in the state of the art and you're excited, for growth opportunities. Because I can always say, yeah, growth opportunities. I meant here at Amazon. I'm always excited for growth opportunities, but other people read it like, well, this guy's loose in the seat. We can talk to him. And then I think it's about showing that you have that ability to bring solutions. People want to hire proactive, helpful folks that are going to jump on things. And so anything you can do that conveys you take action and you get results. I mean, I don't really care what you know. Of course I do. But let's be honest. Most people don't care what you know if they believe that you're the sort of person who's going to jump on a problem and wrestle it to the ground and that you'll figure out any knowledge gaps. That's a way more valuable. Now, of course, that isn't true if you're looking for, PhD biochemists to work on a new molecule. They have to have some relevant knowledge. But more broadly, you want the people that are going to grab things.
1000% true in product, especially, and growth related roles, but also true for, I think, anybody who's a builder. One of the things you mentioned in there, which I think is a bit nuanced and people can get wrong, is that component about writing on LinkedIn to stay top of mind for your connections. I think a lot of people I've talked to actually have said, my LinkedIn content contributed to negative perceptions of me at work. So how do you post on LinkedIn in the right way if you're currently employed and not a content creator?
Yeah. So the first thing I like to tell people I learned at Twitch is there's a community for every passion you have. And if your thing is you think Wookiees and Chewbacca is the coolest thing that ever happened, you can write about that on some platform and build a network of all the other Wookiee lovers. And those people are still very well connected to other jobs. And I'm picking a purposefully absurd example. But um, if you're writing at work, don't write about obviously your own teammates or team members. Don't write about sensitive things. Instead, pick some area of technology that you know something about or some area of product, or forward other people's articles with your comments, but write about something not uninteresting but neutral to your workplace. I was able, though, um, I started posting a lot on LinkedIn while I still worked at Amazon. I just had to be very thoughtful about what I wrote. I didn't talk about taboo Amazon topics. I never was critical of Amazon. Um, and I was still a vice president who gets some scrutiny writing in public. But because my hack, which exemplifies what I'm talking about, I wasn't writing about what my team was doing. I was writing about leadership and career growth, which was neutral to my job. I was leading a games business. I wasn't talking about video games or the games business or the internals of Twitch or Prime Gaming. I was instead talking about career growth and skills, and that was seen as harmless. So that's adjacent to what I did. It's part of what I did, but it wasn't my function. And I think that's how you can write in public without having it come back on you. Whereas if I wrote a breakdown of what I thought happened to our latest product, I'm inviting all the people involved with that product to disagree or feel insulted or slighted or whatever.
And I think probably also the point you made was like, just do it 2 or 3 times a month or something. Like if you're currently employed, there's no need to suddenly start following the LinkedIn growth gurus and get on a daily posting schedule with a set time and engage with all your commenters. In fact, I feel like it's almost better to make it seem like it was spur of the moment thinking, like you were inspired by this career development topic or this product management angle or this tech angle, and you're writing about it and sharing that with your network to help your network.
Yeah, and unless you're trying to become a LinkedIn influencer or top voice or something, there's no need. Your goal is just to touch your network and remind them you exist and that you have smart thoughts. And if you do that twice a month, when they have jobs or they need someone, they are much more likely to remember you, said something interesting, and that's all you're going for. And so, yeah, I don't think by any means you need to put in all this time or effort. I think you can grow on LinkedIn in between half an hour and an hour of effort a month. You can grow in terms of your personal network that can get you a job. So it's a very lightweight task of 30 to 60 minutes, half of that writing a couple posts and half of that connecting to people that you've met or know.
Yeah, the connection component is actually key. Like some people neglect that. If you're too shy about the writing component that we just talked about, at least stay connected with everybody you work with.
Right. Yeah, and LinkedIn makes it super easy where they give you a suggested list every day of you might know this person, and it's based on where you have worked and where you went to school and maybe who else you follow or something. And you can just click your way through the people you know. Some of them will never connect with you. That's fine, uh, because it's a numbers game.
It is. And I think if something like a 25,000 connection limit, so you're not going to hit it even if you send out 5 or 10 requests every day for 10 years. So it's kind of a no downside type of action to potentially build out your referrals and your inbound for all the rest of your future jobs.
Absolutely. And it's just so easy, and it is where people look for talent now. That's why it's so vital.
So bringing it back to the beginning, we walked through your career history and some of the steps that you took to build this leverage, to be living kind of this dream life that so many people have. Is there anything we missed that people need to know if they want to rebuild that?
I think the thing that you we haven't talked about is setbacks will happen. You will make mistakes. I joined some startups that they were not mistakes in this sense. Like I'm talking about, you'll screw up projects. So you'll have setbacks in that sense. You'll also have setbacks. I joined some startups that didn't work out. I still grew in those. So I got something from them, but I was hoping for much more. The point is, careers are long. Um, most people will work at some level, again, roughly 40 years from post college to retirement. Even if you work a shorter career, 20 years is a long time. So when those setbacks happen, plow forward, adjust, learn, and plow forward. I tell the story, very true and unfortunate. I managed to get myself laid off twice. And when I say get myself laid off, some people at the company were laid off and some weren't, and I was, and it's clear that it was my abrasive personality that helped me be among those chosen, because earlier in my career, I was very vocal in criticism of people I didn't agree with. And that made me easy to say, all things considered, since we're shrinking the company, let's get this painful person out. But despite being laid off twice, for poor performance, in a sense, poor behavior, I then climbed to the VP level at Amazon, and now I have this life. So you can have different setbacks and recover as long as you adjust and move forward.
And sadly, we're recording this at the beginning of March. February was a horrible month for layoffs in America. A lot of people got laid off. If someone is in one of those horrible situations where they got laid off, what's your advice to them?
Well, I'm a big fan of advice I got from the book, What Color is Your Parachute, a job hunting book that said, first, treat finding your next job as at least a 40-hour-a-week occupation. You can't just call one or two people, send out one or two applications, and then wait. The mistake people make is as soon as they get a call from one company or an email back, they fixate on that company and they stop building their pipeline. So you better be searching full speed until you actually have a job offer that you've signed and have a start date. So that's one thing I think people can do. The other can be a question of upskilling. If you've absolutely exhausted everything you can do to reach out to network and contacts and find new jobs and call people, I spent a lot of time, I was out of work for about 3 months, a modest period of time, but I had a reading list and was working through educating myself and reading books and upskilling what I knew during all of the time that I wasn't specifically applying for jobs or networking, because that was going to give me a better chance of landing the job. And so you have to treat being unemployed as your new job is make yourself employable and find the job.
All right. This has been an amazing deep dive into career growth. I hope people got a lot out of it. We talked a little bit about your courses, but I want to hear more. If people want more of this, where can they find you for coaching or courses?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's just my name, ethanevans.com. And everything I do is linked off of ethanevans.com. My signature course I teach on the Maven platform, and it's called Stuck at Senior Manager, Breaking Through to Executive. I made it super specific. We talked about specificity. I addressed it so people could recognize, oh, I'm a senior manager. I feel stuck. I'd like to be an executive. This is clearly the thing for me. And then, I find, of course, other people take it, which is great. But that course is me helping people figure out why they're stuck, that what is holding them back and what to specifically do about it. And the big thing is how executive roles are actually different. They're not just doing more than a senior manager with more people. The thinking and responsibilities actually change. So that's what I cover.
Amazing. And as a part of my partnership with Maven, we are excited to offer $100 off of Ethan's course if you use my code AakashXMaven. If people want to get in touch with you for coaching, how can they do that?
So the truth is, I've been overwhelmed on coaching demand, and I can't take any more coaching clients. It's sad because I love to coach, but I'm putting all of my time into things that scale. And so I highly recommend people find a coach, but I'm stepping away from that more and more because it doesn't scale. And so find someone who doesn't like to write and doesn't like to make classes because that lured me away. Find someone whose only thing is coaching. And there are plenty of people who have no desire to sort of be a public face and who are excellent coaches. My pitch for coaching, even though you're trying to pitch me, I will pitch other coaches, is you invest in your education, you spent how much on your degrees, but you have no education in how to navigate your career. That's what a coach does. They're your MBA in career growth. Go get it.
Amazing. Ethan, we could probably go for an hour and a half more, but those episodes seem to perform worse. So we're going to end it here. Thank you so, so much.
It's really been a pleasure. I've had a great time.